Hello, I'm Binci.
Hello, I'm Mirela.
And this is the Broker News podcast.
This is the Broker News podcast. We believe there is never too late to start a business. We did it. We turned entrepreneurs later in life. So why not you? What are you afraid of? Dare to live with purpose, no matter the age.
Hi, I'm very happy to welcome Chris Wilson in today's podcast. He is a stress coach helping companies and their employees with this very important topic of stress, something that can lead to burnout or even depression. I can say today, I don't feel stressed. What about you, Mirela?
Chris, welcome to the Broker News podcast. For the listeners who just clicked on this episode, who is Chris Wilson? What is your background, your story, your mission? Tell us everything you can.
Okay, so it's an absolute pleasure, firstly. I know we've been talking in the background. To be here finally is just immense. So very, very happy. You can see the smile on my face. So I am Chris Wilson, background in exercise science, and have just spent the last 11 years in Australia going through the citizenship and passports and tests and all the rest of it. So proud to say I'm a dual citizen of Australia and the UK, and have been building stress science consultancy and coaching business over in APAC for the last several years. However, returned to the UK to get excited about the UK and European markets, and then obviously to grow the business from here, which is something I'm very passionate about. The mission, which one would you like? My mission is to do great things with great people. That's my my imaginary wall and with the mantra on it. However, in this context, my mission is to start to collect data to be able to look at early risk identifiers for stress. And that is using innovation and tech to be able to use physiological markers to determine who is at risk, what is that risk, and then looking at the risk across the organization. So we can look at risk profiling for individuals and then look at the risk profile for the business.
Let's start with the beginning, Chris. What is stress? And that might be a very basic question, but I've heard so many times there is good stress, the stress you feel when you have a timeline for a project and you are fully focused and you deliver tremendous value in a couple of hours. But I also heard of the bad stress, and I think I felt it myself several times. So what is the difference between good and bad stress? Is it just a question of quantity, or is it a difference between different types of stress?
It's such a big question. And when we start to talk about stress in the current conversation, if I was to speak to a room of people and ask them about stress, they would have many different variations about what it is, what it feels like for them, when it shows up, what impact it has on their many different areas of their life. So stress is very subjective and very varied. However, you are correct. If we've got something called eustress, the good stress, the positive stress, and then distress, which is the negative stress. And we have to try and determine which one we can utilize and which one we can avoid. And it's this constant balancing act. And I think this is the piece that I want to share with the listeners today, is that stress is this or this, but it's not true. Stress is fluid. Stress is this thing that can show up every now and again. And sometimes we know why it's showing up. Sometimes we've got no idea why it's showing up. We're just having a bad week and we don't know why. And so what is stress? Stress is many different things for many different people. But current state, if I was to ask someone what is stress, they would give me a reason. They would give me it's relationships. I would speak to my 11-year-old daughter and the reason why I don't have hair anymore, or there's financial stress, or there's pressure from work. There's all these different reasons. There's another important piece in there, and that is that at no point will you hear me, or should we ever speak about you should never be stressed. We shouldn't avoid stress. It's actually vital. I won't patronize the listeners, but it's fundamental to everything that we require through growth and development, and the reason why we survived as a species. So it is vital for us. To the last point of your question, it's about the type of stress we are experiencing or perceiving. And then it's about the quantity of that stress that we are now perceiving. So that's where the detriments of stress really start to come in for us as individuals. It's the load and it's the relentlessness of that load that takes its toll on the resources in the body.
So be stressed, people, but not too much.
Always.
What shall a normal person like me or a colleague of mine know about stress? What are the risk factors? What throws us in that black hole? Can I prevent it? What about the stress management techniques? I know I have a bit too many questions for now, but is the lifestyle a factor for stress? Are my lifestyle choices like sleep? Yeah, of course, that's a rhetoric question. I know you're going to say sleep is important for managing stress, right? Sleep, sports, exercising, the way I eat. Does this have an influence on my stress level?
Again, Mirela, I love your questions and they are so big. And the answer to that is yes, of course. If I was to stand, and I purposely do this, so I'd stand in front of a room and I've got, let's pick a number, let's say 50 beautiful, intelligent, amazing people in front of us, all successful in their own right. And I would say to them, right, we've got 48 hours to improve our well-being. What should we do? And I'll do a little quick fire around the room and they'll go, oh, Chris, I need to sleep better, laugh more, drink more water, exercise, meditate. And I would say, yes, all of those things are correct. However, why don't we do them? So often what I find when it comes to stress, it's not an educational gap, it's a value gap. And this is where it comes into, okay, so what do we do about this? How do we then change this idea about what's important? Where does the value sit? I know what I've got to do, but how do I allocate resource to doing that over the really important things in my life, like work, finance, relationships? And we tend to sacrifice self over these other external factors. And the key thing is, these are the decisions we make. Now, logically, my brain will go, I know what I'm supposed to do, Chris. I get this all the time in my coaching. I don't patronize people by saying you really should sleep more. They go, I know I should sleep more. Great. So why don't we do it? Well, Chris, you don't understand. You know, I've got work, I've got commitments, I've got family, yeah, I get it. Most of them have. So it's really about this conversation around, is it an educational gap? Often no. Is it a value gap? Okay, so how do we then prioritize self over others? And then how do we create a sustainable level of performance that I can keep going in my work, I can keep being successful without burning myself out and throwing myself under the bus? The strategies will change depending on the individual. The term I often use is prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So if I start to prescribe things to people without doing a diagnosis, not that I'm a doctor, then it's almost impossible to get it right. It's a load piece. It's a, how far have you been in this exhausted state for? How much control have you actually got? Change your life. It's like, yeah, okay, but how much autonomy and choice have we actually got? And then what can we control? Lots of different variations in there when it comes to what is the magic bullet. And I do get it, Mirela. People ask me, is it the blue pill or the red pill? Which one do I need to take to stop feeling how I'm feeling right now?
Why is it so difficult to prioritize self over others? Because it sounds familiar, I have to say.
Of course, we all get it. The difficulty comes with external pressure and expectation and societal pressure and status. Told this story a few times, but it's not unfamiliar for me to find people who I would get invited in to work with the likes of the Mirelas of the world. And I would come in and the manager or the leader would come to me and go, any chance you could work with Mirela? Her numbers are starting to shift a little bit. And every time I speak to Mirela, she's like, look, I've got it. I'm on top of it. Leave me alone. So when I go and speak to the likes of Mirela or other people, what I often find is you've been in that phase or going down that rabbit hole for such a long time that we are willing to sacrifice relationships, we're willing to sacrifice health, we're willing to sacrifice sleep for the status, for the kudos, because our numbers define us. There are commission, there are pay packets, there are position in the company, they offer some sort of security for the future. These are all priorities to us. And it's really hard to unravel all of that over, oh, I need to go and do some exercise or drink some more water or go and have some fun with friends. It's difficult to balance that unless we consciously, in my opinion, map it and have that relationship between actually that is vital to my success, which is often the piece that's missing. We're often told that it's do more at all times, and we try to be everything to everyone at all times, and it's often to our own detriment.
And it's not abnormal.
Unfortunately not.
Okay, at least I feel normal. Binci, you want to ask something?
Yes, because Mirela and I have been at the HR Europe Festival not long ago, and there was Kian and On. They were speaking about what they were or are actually doing for the people who work there. At On, you can take days or weeks off whenever you feel like doing so. It doesn't matter how often you do it. Absolutely doesn't matter. And you're not going to be paid less. Would that a good example?
Yeah, I really like that, Binci. I started to create something from my experience in sport. Okay, so stress is a load. And if there's negative stress, it uses resources. What we often have, if, for an example, in organizations is we have projects, multiple projects running at multiple times, and we jump from project to project. And what we don't have is any opportunity to down-regulate or to recover from the stress load. If you were an athlete, I would build you up incrementally. I would have this program where I build you up to make sure you can perform at the level required. And then post that, I would allocate in exercise recovery or active recovery. So I started to suggest to organizations, we can do a 3+1. So in a 4-week, it's not quite accurate, but a 4-week month, we would do 3 weeks of high intensity activities followed by a 1-week active recovery. And the language I would get is, we can't have a week off holiday. And it's like, no, it's not a week off. It's lower intensity to reconnect with team, to do your administration, to do all the things that get on top of you that often get bumped into home time or weekends or extended hours in the office. So we have a 3-week sprint followed by a 1-week recovery. And it was almost offensive to suggest this to some leaders, not all, but to some leaders. What we're asking is high performance at all times is not sustainable. So to your suggestion or to what you've heard in the background, it's a beautiful way of giving autonomy and self-empowerment to the individuals. As long as there's high trust, we can assume that it'll work.
But before that, let's go one step back. How can I measure stress? And I'm going to tell you my story. I had many wearables, and one of them was this famous ring. I'm not going to say the name, but definitely not the mortar one. And each time I would exercise, that ring would show me that I'm highly stressed because they simply measure my heart rate, which obviously was increasing. But I was exercising exactly for managing my stress. So not the type of thing I want to get rid of. How good are all those wearables? Should we trust them? Should we trust a simple heart rate measurement to say, yes, I'm stressed in that moment? Or are there more sophisticated methods to measure and detect stress?
Yeah. So I was with the Australian Institute of Sport, obviously in Canberra, and they were giving us some insights into the accuracy of the current wearables. Because what they wanted to do is to track the data while the athletes were traveling around and going to different countries and the like. So there was wearables, there was apps, there was rings, straps, watches, all the rest of it. And they just simply said that it's not there yet. We can see where they're trying to go, but they're just not there yet that's reliable. I don't wear any devices now, but I used to buy into the devices because I wanted to understand it, whether I could refer it or recommend it. I've had many experiences like yours, Mirela, where, you've had a great night's sleep, and I know I've been awake all night with my then baby daughter. So it's not there yet. However, what I love about this technology that's coming out is that you and I and Binci, and we can talk about blood pressure, heart rate variability, stress index scores, fatigue index scores. We can talk about these now, where these weren't in our vocabulary, or we didn't even consider them, whether that was of interest to me. The fact that I'm monitoring sleep, okay, it might not be accurate, but I'm conscious of my sleep. Let me catch myself out again there. That can also be a detriment, because I do have clients who wake up and they start to become hyper focused on that number on their watch in the morning. And it might not be true. We've got other data sets that are coming in. So I use saliva biomarkers. There's a really good example where I would take physiological markers in the body, biomarkers, to map your current stress state, cortisol awakening response. The reason why I use saliva is it's non-invasive. I don't need to inject or draw blood or anything like that. And it's a really good way of looking at the physiology. Is it accurate on its own? It's just a set of numbers, but it gives us great insight. I would talk about my coaching program. Taking the cortisol awakening response is looking at your current stress state in a moment, but it's a very good mirror. So when I speak to people, let's say executives, C-suite leaders, executives, sometimes if I've been brought in to run a program for, let's say, 14 leaders, 3 or 4 of them might go, I don't know why I'm doing this. This is just a waste of my time. And I used to be offended. Whereas I now know they're the ones I really need to speak to, because what tends to happen is they go, I don't want to do this. This is a load of rubbish. Then I put up their physiology in front of them and I go, what's going on? They're like, nothing. Everything's great. Everything's amazing. And I go, well, your physiology is telling me a slightly different story. Would you like to talk about it? And then they start to go, you can imagine, holding the mirror up. Actually, I'm not sleeping that great at the moment. There's big pressure going on. We're hearing rumours about a bit of uncertainty in the markets, putting lots of pressure on my team. Okay. The data itself is so powerful because it is that internal viewpoint on what's going on inside, rather than that externalizing of everything's great, everything's fine, my world's amazing, aren't I just the best thing ever? That's the bit I love about this stress. The stress technology and the speed in which we're getting access to it now.
So everything is changing. I remember doing such a saliva test at one point, and I just knew I feel a bit off. I could not describe my situation precisely. And a month later, when the doctor called me, I was a bit surprised to learn that I'm in full burnout, which I could not even understand. I knew I'm putting pressure on myself. I had some timelines and I wanted to deliver something as quickly as possible. It was also a pretty hard period of time because I was leaving a job, but I could not imagine, without having the data in front of me, that me speaking against burnout and toxic cultures, I am the one who's actually affected, which leads me to something else. Let's discuss workplace-related stress. I don't want us necessarily to speak about workplace-related versus family-related, because stress is stress and it's very difficult to have a clear cut what is work-related, what is home stress. But that's one of the biggest elephants in the room. We published recently in the Broker News an article where we discussed about the devastating effects of workplace-related stress for the economy, for the healthcare systems, and particularly for the insurance sector, because our audience is mostly insurance companies. But I also know excellent companies. Some of them are my former employers, and that's not hard to guess who they are. And they are highly interested in measuring and preventing stress. So what can a company do?
What we've got this piece now where there is impact. When we talk about impact on individuals, sectors, economy, it's not an exaggeration of impact. It's actually because we've got this overwhelming cascading effect now. It's a good point you brought up, because we're trying to target work-related stress, but my body can't differentiate it. Work stress is work, and we understand it's fundamental and it's important. There's an integrity piece, there's a performance piece, but that doesn't mean that an unhealthy person or an ill family member, or I can't afford my mortgage, or I'm going through a separation, one of my children are ill. These are all stresses. And so what we try and do is we try and target one area because we're trying to identify who's going to pay for it. I think that's an opinion, actually. I've got to be careful with that comment. But that's typically what we look at. Even the World Health Organization, their definition of burnout was a workplace-related stress, and I simply can't find the truth in that. Is work stressful? Sometimes. Is that bad? Sure, but it's not the only stress. And what we find is the accumulation of stress and the poor or lack of interventions that really start to build up. So you thought you were going fine, you had certain feelings. If we'd really sat down and talked about it, we probably could have identified a few things nice and early for yourself, but we have got the ability to override and keep pushing. So there lies the truth. We don't get to burnout by just going good, 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 falling off a cliff. It doesn't happen like that. Often what we find is actually a descaling or a descending pattern of behaviors, descending pattern of energy and all the rest of it, before we finally get to that point of going, don't know why I'm feeling like this, but I really just can't face the day in front of me, regardless of what it looks like. I've had clients who can't get out of bed in the morning. They run their body into exhaustion, work without knowing what's going on, truly knowing what's going on inside their workforce. What are they supposed to do about it? It's easy to blame work. We've all got shareholders, we've all got boards, we've got customers we have to please and meet expectation for. But there is a reality that we just don't know, because we still rely on net promoter scores. We still rely on annual wellbeing surveys, which is fill this out. It's not enough. So that's why on my side, we've been creating a solution for organizations and for the insurance sector, where we are looking at using technology now, where we can start to take those physiological markers to do with cardiac metabolic health, to do with stress levels, and then we can start to give feedback to the individuals to empower them about self-regulation, but then also start to generate reports and insights for organizations and insurance sectors, organizations, where we can start to look at risk profiling organizations at different levels inside the business. This is the piece. We're not saying that we can solve all the problems, but let's identify if we've got a problem to solve first. And then it's about whereabouts in the organization should we target the spend? Because at the moment, we know we're losing people. We know we can't hold on to our talent. We can't attract talent. We're struggling with the people side of the business. And all we know is that everyone's telling us it's great to work here. So this piece we're building now, and we're going to try and provide this great insight to markets and organizations, is where in the business have you got the biggest risk when it comes to people? That way we can start to create solutions, and that way we can target spend. And that's where I believe insurers or the insurance industry should be the leaders in this conversation.
We would hope to see that, because actually I can see obviously how such a solution could help insurance industry. On one hand, we truly believe that insurance has a noble purpose, because it's not about paying when something bad happens. We should help people be healthy. We should help people feel good and be probably less stressed. But how can you do that without understanding what are the risk factors and collecting the data? So if I understand you correctly, you want to collect data from people and then provide an objective view on the stress.
Yeah, we want to provide value to the individual. That's an important piece. To your point, we wear watches, we wear rings, we wear straps. We were invested in understanding our own health metrics. And I said to you before, I said many times, I love this conversation around increasing health literacy. We're having beautiful conversations now about some high variability sleep index. So we want to add value to the individual. But we can also use the very same data set to be able to map that over an organization, to then feed back to the organization, this is where your risk sits. And from an insurance point of view, my background is sport and exercise. And I've said to you before, we are looking at historical claims. Within the sporting industry, concussion is a very strong conversation right now, where people are using 20, 30-year historical evidence to suggest now I'm struggling because of what happened back then. The fact that we are seeing some organizations not willing to buy into this, I think there is a high risk to the organizations and to the sector. And so the reason why I lean into insurance is we could be leading the way here by saying, all right, so if you are willing to put a risk profile over your organization, we can lower your premium. We can start to look at, you are a lower risk organization, therefore we can save you X amount of money, which I think is vital. And what that will do is it will start to then shift the conversation to, we really want to be a healthy workplace. Fantastic. Okay, so this is what we need to do. Rather than the current model is, you need to be healthy as an individual because we want to be a healthy workplace, which doesn't work because of things we've already discussed.
So that means if I think about the insurance sector, who could be interested in this type of solution would be a health insurance company or a life insurance company, but as well employee benefits and workers' compensation schemes. And needless to say, every HR person should look into this type of solution because they would have data, they would have objective facts and figures. And then there is the old saying, you can't manage what you can't measure.
And we're basing this off internal data sets. So what I mean by that is the biomarkers that we're measuring. It's not just a one annual survey to say, if you say that we're a really great place to work, we'll incentivize that response. What we're saying is you can hold your face up to a camera for 30 seconds and we can start to get this high level accurate data set. So 30 seconds and we can take data from that. That will then give live real-time feedback to the individual. And we can have conversations, coaching conversations, interventions there. We can also use that one data point to then feed back to the organization and into the insurance. It's such a beautiful piece now where it used to be fill out a survey and we think we're doing okay versus technology and innovation allows us to take a snapshot of data that can really start to look at trends over time. Maybe we can do some predictive data sets. Maybe we can start to look at early risk identifiers. There's some beautiful things in there to talk about, especially in the insurance space. So yeah, I agree with your list.
So actuaries and data analytics people, you might get some data to play with. What can be more exciting? When we speak about diagnosing and measuring stress, that's important. But more important is to get people better. Do you offer also solutions for the companies or for the individuals to manage their stress levels?
Yeah, there's a word in there. So diagnosis, we would need medical. The language is important. We don't want to put anyone at risk. We're not diagnosing people. If we use the word monitoring, it shifts the position slightly. But through the monitoring, we can make the individual aware. We can also make the organization aware. Now, once there is awareness, then we can start to look at interventions. We're working with universities in the US now, and we've got a broad team looking at best practice protocols. What happens when this data comes in? What do we do? What happens with this data? What do we do? When is the best time to capture this data? What's the frequency required to get accurate, valid, reliable data from this type of collection? So we're in the background now, making sure that we're putting best practice forward. So when it comes to using the data internally in the organizations, there's confidence and trust around. We can make business decisions based upon the data sets we've got in front of us. We can allocate spend, allocate resource, shift business decisions based upon what we're seeing with these data. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, indeed. Can't wait to see your solution. I'm going to open now a topic and you're going to tell me, Mirela, you want to throw me in a black hole. You've seen a lot and I've seen a lot. You've seen hierarchical organizations and self-organized teams. And I think a couple of years ago, when I would post on LinkedIn something about self-organized teams, I would get pretty much zero reactions. Yesterday, I posted something. Indeed, I tagged Corporate Rebels because I absolutely love what they are doing. And I think they are some of the best people to speak about self-organized teams. And they are so fun and they have amazing content. Mm-hmm. And I got a tremendous response. So having in mind that self-organized teams are getting traction lately, and also the fact that a hierarchical organization probably cannot keep up with the demands of the modern world, what is the stress component here? Have you seen more stress in hierarchical organization than in autonomous self-empowered teams, self-organized teams? Because at least my gut feeling would say, if I am given freedom and autonomy, I'm going to work in my own terms, so naturally I should feel less stressed. But what is the science saying about that?
There's many avenues here, and thank you for throwing me over the bus. It's actually true. So hierarchical models, we've got this strong evidence piece, and it's not my data, but it's out there, and it's very obvious now that hierarchical models, the perception of that is that the higher up you are in the model, the more stress you will be. That's not technically true. The more responsibility you have, but stress perception for being subordinates or lower down in the hierarchical model means that your perception of stress is higher. Now, if we broke that down, if I'm put something in there, right? So what we're talking about, C-suite, even middle management, but not so much there. So C-suite executives, SLTs, what we know is that they have got autonomy. They have got position of power, so decision making, which is an internal driver, by the way. It's very important for us as humans that we need some sort of position of power. Cautious about how that language is interpreted, because it's not a negative, but it is just a position of authority or autonomy or power. There is also the fact that I have got kudos. So I'm in a position on that org chart that means my status is higher than others. However, it does also come with a caveat, and that is that there's higher risk of burnout being on top of the tree. Now, let's go down that hierarchical model. I know that I might have dual incomes because financially we're stretched. I know I don't have any flexibility in my finances. I feel disempowered. I am constantly controlled by others. My status within society doesn't feel that great. So that's an added perception of stress. I could keep going on, but you can see where we're going with that. So this hierarchical model is very obvious that there is a higher risk at the top of the model, but the perception of stress is higher at the bottom of the model.
That is fascinating to hear. So if I'm a CEO and I feel powerful, I might be very happy with my position and status, but I might not be as stressed as someone who's working for a minimum wage.
I don't know as humans if we're ever truly happy. Because even though I might have a CEO status, I might be looking at other CEOs who get paid more, or they might have different types. There's always that, the human, I don't know.
Comparing ourselves with the others, former colleagues. Yeah, we all do that.
But I know that, if I've got that well-paid, I'm well remunerated, financially I'm secure, I might be in a position where one income is enough inside of our household. That gives us certain freedoms, and we've got health insurance. We're covered in many aspects that our society measures success. And therefore, the lower down that hierarchy, we don't perceive ourselves to be in a much more secure position. And security is one of the fundamentals that we're looking for. Now, we don't want to take that away always, because we do want ambition. Now, if we think about the hierarchical model, we often bring people in the bottom of the model, and then we expose them to systems and process, experiences. We then get them to lead teams. And what we're doing is stress inoculation. We're exposing them to different stresses and preparing them to get to the top of that model. However, we all know that it's very limited at the top of that pyramid. We're not all going to make it. And if we don't believe there is fair opportunity for me to climb that ladder, then my stress levels, my stress reaction in the body will be very high and very negative.
Can we burn the ladders?
Can we burn them? Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's lots of things coming out today, and I don't know whether we can paint this or not for the audience, but to Binci's point was about, can we create this autonomy across maybe a flat model? Let's say that. Can we pay everyone the same? We'll have to argue the value piece in there. But we often see this idea of, well, can I truly regulate myself? The model I would talk to in my world is autonomous business rhythms. Because if stress is fluid and I don't know when I'm going to feel negative or when I'm going to feel great, can I pick up and put down according to what I need? In group dynamics, can we then do that 3+1 model where we're all going to sprint together and then we're all going to recover together? Is that adequate enough? There's different ways in which we can create this solution. What we do know that hierarchical models have been in our society for such a long time, and we're not entirely convinced they currently fit the requirements of where business is going. It's not there yet. And what we've got to do with convincing organizations about getting rid of a hierarchical model is convincing those positions of power that they can give up some of that power.
Which is never easy. Once you get the power, it's very difficult to give it up. Yes,
it defines us, Mirela. It defines us.
One thing is, I do understand what you just said, and I am also not for hierarchies, but there are people who need them. There are people who do not want to go up that far, who are very comfortable somewhere in the middle or even below that. They come in, they do their work, they go. They don't so much identify with the place they work at, but they wouldn't even identify in another place. That's just the way they are. One has to recognize that too. And I have been thinking a lot about stress lately because I knew we would be having this podcast. And even though I do have stress as well at work, I do have stress in my private life, these stresses don't stress me very much. But there's something else, another kind of stress I want to put forward, which is when I am really stressed, it is with things that I myself cannot manage or change or do anything about them and have to, for example, wait and can't do it. These things are the ones stressing me out a lot. What do you say? What can I do that, or I or others do with that?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Binci. The first part to yours is I look for those people when I go to an organization. We love those stable people who are very good, very knowledgeable in their positions, know what they're supposed to do. They don't want to keep clambering over other people to climb the ladder. They're very content. Great, because they're the stable force behind the teams. I look at young dynamic startups and you've got young ambitious people and they all want to climb over each other. It becomes a very unstable environment. So to your point, I absolutely agree. I love those people, look for those people in the teams because they are my stable, they are my lighthouse. Yeah, we have to understand that. When we're talking, it's very, two-dimensional almost. People are very, circumstances change. Maybe they found their dream job and their ambition has changed. Maybe circumstances outside of work forces them to change ambition. Age. We all know we get to a certain point, and I'm talking about myself here. It's the only person I really can talk about. My competitiveness has dropped as I've got to a certain age. Do I want to start arguing with people and wrestling with people? Not physically, metaphorically. And the answer to that is no, I don't. So what comes with age is wisdom. And so we have to recognize all of the above. It's circumstantial to an individual. And that's an important piece. And that's where it's definitely one thing where it gives us some insight, but you need to contextualize the data. When I start to look at the physiological markers we get, I might have someone in a normal range, let's say, but without the context of why, it might be a descending profile. That means they've been high for such a long time, they're going through burnout and they're starting to drop, but I just caught them in that one moment in a normal range. So the conversation that comes behind that is the power piece. It gives me the insight. So yeah, to your point, as humans and individuals and the different circumstances we do come across in the workplace, it's important to recognize that.
I think you debunk several myths regarding stress because you are a coach of executives and you provide a lot of trainings and keynote speeches on stress. From your meetings, what are the common misconceptions people have when it comes to this topic? Other than the CEO, who's the most stressed person in the company, or a couple of other things we discussed during this podcast.
Yeah, there's been a few in there. One thing that really stands out for me is, I think I'm going to call it a misalignment between how long it takes to recover from stress and that burnout is actually classified as trauma. And so we think that I'm feeling really tired. What I need to do is probably have my 1 week holiday in the year. That'll fix everything. What we know is that you're already in debt. So when we talked about that project piece, so we've got a project that's coming up and we've got to accelerate and meet the deadline. Okay, so now you're in debt. Not everyone, but let's assume that the general people, you're now in debt because you've been working at such a high pace for such a long time. Because there's no active recovery in there, no time to reset, we go again, and we go again. And then finally, when your body and your brain start to go, do you know what? I think I've had enough. I think I'm going to start to force the issue here. And we start to have these feelings and we get an immune response and we start to get that physical, mental and emotional shift. People think it's just a matter of taking the foot off the gas a bit and then they're going to be okay. And it's simply not the case. Unraveling all of the behaviors that have got you to this point, not all of them, but the negative behaviors, let's say, if we want to categorize, takes a long time. And if we start to talk about it in a sense of trauma, we need to have lots of different support mechanisms, lots of different behavior shifts, lots of empathy coming from colleagues and workplaces who are willing to support, lots of buy-in from support networks, family, friends. All this it's very difficult to manage because most of us want to give this perception of that we're doing okay, we're doing all right, we can do this on our own. And so that's what I find with people in leadership positions, because that's who we spoke to. They figure they got to do it on their own and they just want the red pill or the blue pill. Fix it, and I need to crack on as quickly as possible. And it takes someone like me to be that, not only the mirror, but often the challenge to those individuals to go, it's not going to work that way. And we need to shift thinking and we need to shift behavior. And we need to get buy-in from support networks. And I say that, Mirela, I didn't think it was a thing, but now after coaching so many people for such a long time, that's the one. That's the one that really stands out for me, is that I'm going to keep going and going and going, and then you're going to fix me, and I'm going to pay you, and you're going to fix me, and I'm going to crack on.
Some things are priceless.
Health. And it's
happiness.
I find, anyway, I'm going off on my little brain tangent here. What are some of the myths? It's the speed in which they recover from burning out the body. It is the misunderstanding between stress, and stress is this kind of thing where, it's work, it's relationships. No one really talks about diabetes, cardiometabolic health. There are chronic, one of the impacts we have from negative chronic stress load is inflammation. Now, if we talk about inflammation, people go, oh, yeah, okay, that's not very good in the body. That's an outcome from chronic stress load. And it's not only localized inflammation, it's system inflammation. And then that has repercussions all through your system. The one piece that really stands out, Mirela, is there's an assumption. We talk about cortisol, but often when I challenge a room or I challenge an individual with what does it do? What's its role? They say, well, okay, so it's a hormone. It's to do with fight or flight. The bit that often I find skips a beat, and I've been speaking to the university in the US about this very subject, and that is cortisol's role as a hormone is to mobilize energy. Now, it's part of this process called gluconeogenesis. So glucose, energy, new, genesis, creation of. Sorry to break that down, people, but this creation of energy occurs in the liver. Now, what that does is it increases our blood sugar levels. That puts pressure on the pancreas and insulin creation. So there is a risk of this chronic stress, negative stress, increases the risk of high blood sugar levels and then becoming insulin resistant. And it's something that's not often talked about when it comes to stress in the workplace or stress for the individual. We often just think it's about more sleep and going for a walk and doing some meditation. And this is the piece. If we don't get on it early enough, we are increasing the risk to the individual for chronic health issues, early death from a stress-related disease. Not my language, but that's the language we use. It's something that we either avoid the conversation or we don't appreciate the conversation, but it's a conversation we must have. And then I start to talk about cortisol steal, which is, to give people flashbacks. And I'm doing this purposely. I'm taking us off down this little road. If I took you back to high school where we talk about fight or flight, most people say, yeah, I get it. I go, so what's the role of cortisol? They'll go, well, it's to give me energy. Great. So that's a survival hormone. It will prioritize cortisol over all of your other hormones because it is a survival hormone. So it's stealing the resources from the other hormones that regulate mood, emotions, sleep. It steals it to prioritize. So all of a sudden, we're now having a health conversation that's beyond, I feel tired, to there is significant impact to your health here. And if we don't get on top of this soon, because remember, I'm speaking to people who are they've been in this state for a very long time and they've normalized it. Now we're looking at chronic health issues. Anyway, that was my little rabbit hole. Thank you for listening, everyone.
That's wonderful. I learned so many things, Chris, today. I learned that being a bit stressed is not necessarily bad. I learned that being a CEO doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the most stressed person in the organization. And also something I personally needed, prioritizing others over self is normal. Thank you for that.
No, it's fine. It's not the whole picture, Mirela. In short conversations we can keep building, but it's even in this short conversation today, I hope someone gets curious about something. You know what, Chris, I'd like to know more about this. Or, Chris, I didn't quite understand that. Or, I don't believe you. Happy for all challenges, all comers. It's a powerful conversation to have because we're talking to individuals, but the individuals then impact teams, impacts organizations. And again, at the beginning of this conversation, we started talking about economies, societies. We now see the impact. We've got the numbers to your piece you released. Was it last week? I think it was.
A couple of weeks ago, I think.
A couple of weeks ago. And that resonated with people. It really took off where there was strong conversations because people are now seeing it, hearing it, and they're buying into it. And that's why I believe, again, it's biased, it's opinionated. I believe that with the innovation technology we have available right now, we can shift away from these subjective questionnaires to then, no one believes it, or we don't know if it's true or not, to very strong data sets that we can now start to influence organizations, sectors, markets, economies. And that's the piece I'm excited about.
And if someone wants to challenge you, where do they find you?
I would always say come to LinkedIn first, or just come to my website. It's stress-scientist.com. You can come on there and find the usuals. There's always ways to find me, Mirela. Go through Binci and yourself and then come to me, or let's have a virtual coffee and a good fireside chat and we can start to figure things out. That's what I love the most.
Thank you, Chris. Wonderful having you here today. Binci?
It was really wonderful. And at some point, I would like to do another talk with you about hormones, about things like menopause or andropause, because most men don't think that exists, but that does really exist. I know what I'm talking about. And this, I think, would be a very interesting topic too, and should also be a topic in big insurances or small insurances, because it's affecting everybody. It happens with everybody, to everybody. And I think one could learn a lot talking with you.
Oh, Binci, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. We will come back with more episodes of the Broker News podcast.